Welcome to After School with Mr. Van Huss. Today I'm joined by New York Times best-selling author John Jackson Miller. Listen to some of this bio. He is the New York Times best-selling author of the Scribe Award-winning Star Wars Kenobi, as well as Star Wars The Living Force, Star Wars A New Dawn, Star Wars Lost Tribe of the Sith, Star Wars Knight Errant, and the Star Wars Legends The Old Republic graphic novel collections from Marvel. He has written novels and comics for other franchises, including Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, Halo, Iron Man, Mass Effect, Planet of the Apes, and The Simpsons. His latest book is this right here, and it's also what I'm currently reading, Batman Resurrection. And we're going to talk about some of that today and also talk about his journey to being a best-selling author. Here is John Jackson Miller. Welcome to After School with Mr. Van Huss. Today I'm joined by John Jackson Miller. Mr. Miller, thanks for joining me tonight.
Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So I am currently reading Batman Resurrection, and I'm a huge fan. I've been a Batman fan since I was about 4 years old, and I've always been into Batman stuff, so I was very excited to get this. This was actually a Christmas gift that my wife got for me, and I picked it out and made sure she was getting it for me because I knew it had been out for a month or two. It's excellent. And I know you have worked in a lot of other, gotten to play in a lot of other universes and things like that. Just tell us a little bit, for anybody who might not be familiar with your work, what do you do? What kind of stuff have you worked on?
Well, I started at Marvel doing comics like Iron Man, then did Star Wars comics that led to Star Wars novels, that led to Star Trek novels, that then led to back to Star Wars again with my new novel, The Living Force, that came out this last fall or last spring, and then also Batman Resurrection and the sequel to it, which I'm writing right now. I have always been a fan of comics and of these movies. I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, a long time ago. That was back when Star Wars came out. So I was a fan of it then and was a fan of Star Trek when it came back on TV in reruns. And then the Next Generation show came out. And all that time I was collecting comic books. Went to the University of Tennessee at Knoxville. And, while I was working at the campus newspaper there, I was there in the summer of 1989. And I decided, well, hey, I'll go review this new Batman movie because I'm afraid it won't be any good, but I got nothing else to do because at least back then there wasn't anything to do in Knoxville in the summer. And I ended up going to see the movie 12 times. So, and again, that was partially because there wasn't that much to do in Knoxville in the summer, but also it was because it really hit a nerve with me and inspired me. And, to get a chance to actually write a story that takes place, sort of in the universe of the first two movies by Tim Burton, which are Batman and Batman Returns, to pretend that there were more stories with Michael Keaton as Batman has just been a lot of fun.
That's incredible. I remember going to see that movie, and it was a crucial piece of my life and really a crucial piece of my childhood. I was 11 when it came out. And I remember my mom and dad taking me and my cousin to our local movie theater in Kingsport. And we stood in line for like 6 hours to see the midnight premiere of that movie. Yeah. A couple of years ago, I think it was 2008 when The Dark Knight came out, I was actually in a USA Today story because I had sent in some comments about they had asked for people who were excited about, sequels. And I was like, Batman had such an impact on me, and they sent that. For the people who are watching this, like probably my students who are young and don't remember this, back in the day when a big movie would come out, like especially a superhero movie, the few we got there in the 80s and 90s, they would put things like these out, like little novelizations of like the different movies.
Oh yeah, you got them all.
And like obviously for anybody who's not familiar, this one takes place here, like in between Batman and Batman Returns. I used to love reading these because It was, I didn't really look at it as like spoilers. I looked at it as just kind of a preview of
Yeah.
the movie. Now, I usually went in knowing a whole lot what was going to happen because I'd read this. But I liked watching the movie kind of play out in my head before I saw it on the screen. That's
Yeah.
one thing I love about your book so much is I'm about halfway through it and it plays out like this does. Like it's just
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, here's another Michael Keaton movie in novelization form that you know you can put into that universe. So it's great.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you going to see the movie like 12 times
Well,
because it had a big impact on me too.
well, let me explain, for the students what this kind of writing is. What I do is different from fan fiction because it is what they call licensed, and that means that in the case of my Star Wars novels, Disney has got a contract with a book publisher. The book publisher hires me, and I am invited to do work for them and to produce a novel for them, and then they can do whatever they want with it after that. But that works the same way whether I'm doing something for Star Wars or Marvel with Disney, or doing something with Star Trek and Paramount with a publisher called Simon and Schuster, or whether I'm doing stuff for Batman and Warner Brothers. And actually, for that one, I have the same editor that is on my Star Wars work at Random House. And so these books, again, they're distinct from the fan fiction, which is fun and it's good practice to do, but you'll never ever get it published. You'll never be able to sell it because you don't own the characters, you don't own the rights. But this kind of licensed stuff, and you held up those books there. These books have been around for almost 100 years, and tying into movies and radio shows, and they also do comics that are based on movies and TV shows and things like that. And they kind of come in two forms. Either it's what they call an adaptation, where they would tell you the whole story again. So those books you've got are
Mhm.
just what happened in Batman the movie, just what
Mhm.
happened in Batman Returns the movie. It's a little different because they didn't have the movie completed when they actually did it. So there are differences between those two projects, between the novel and the comic. Or not the novel, the novel is different from the movie, and also the
Mhm.
comic book based on the movie is also different from the movie because what do we write the stuff based on when there's no movie yet? We use the script, we use whatever notes they send us. I did the adaptation for one of the Indiana Jones movies for comics, and in that case, they hadn't filmed it yet. We just had a script that we were going from. Now so that's what's called a straight, basic adaptation. And why would they do those? They would do those because we didn't have video. We didn't have the first thing people would get would be VCRs or DVD players. We didn't have any way to actually relive that movie until it just normally came on TV. And so that was what that was there for. Is it was to publicize the picture, and then also to give people a way to relive it without going back to the theater. And because these things wouldn't be in theaters very long. And so that's one whole group. And then the book that I wrote, and all the books pretty much that I write, except for that one Indiana Jones story, they're what we call original tie-in novels, or original fiction, where I write my novel as if it is a movie, as if it is a TV show, or at least that it belongs in that world. And depending on what franchise it is, it can be something where I have to pay real close attention to what else is going on in the story because there's a new TV show coming out, or a new character coming out in a TV show or something like that I have to include. Or it can be something where it's pretty loose. I did a graphic novel for a series called Battlestar Galactica, which is a TV show. And that TV show had been off the air for 40 years. And they didn't really care what details I added because I wasn't going to collide with anything that they were going to do. And so we do all these kinds of things. And again, why do we do this? In part, it's yeah, to give people a way to enjoy this in between, if the movie sequels take 2 years or 3 years or whatever, we were able to sort of build on your fun. In the case of Batman, well, there's not going to be any more Batman movies, made in the 1980s and 1990s. This particular variety I'm doing is very specific to that. And so this is the only way, either by the comic books, which are called Batman '89 comics, which my friends are doing, or this novel and the new novel that I'm doing. That's the way to relive that. But yeah, that is kind of how it works. And it's a there's a whole section in the bookstore for them, and it's something where don't ever let anybody tell you that these books aren't literature or aren't serious novels, because they are just as hard to write as any other kind of a novel or any other kind of a comic book or anything like that. They're actually a little harder because I'm having to pay attention and connect to things that are may not even be filmed yet. But I'm connecting to these various things, and so in the case of the Batman '89 comics, I have some references in my novel to what will later happen in the comic books. And again, that's just because I coordinate that. Why do we do it? Because we think it's fun for the reader.
And it's totally fun. Like I've read the '89 comic books also, and anything like that. It's always great to see, stuff tie together and stuff kind of pop up that you know from something else.
That's
What
right.
influenced you to do what you do? What made you want to be a writer?
Well, I started writing comics the same time I started reading them. So I go back to age 6. I actually was drawing my own, and then my dad got a photocopier, copy machine, and I would actually print my own. And I discovered that there was a group of people out there that were trading their little comic books and the magazines that they did. And that's something where it led directly to my job because I used to do newsletters, which we called fanzines, back when I was in high school, and I would send them, to people who subscribed or that I just wanted to have to get them. Well, by doing that, I was learning how to actually design a newsletter, design a magazine, and then what would happen is, I would become the editor of my high school newspaper. And when I did that, I was actually able to very easily say, yeah, I know how to flow copy onto a page. I know how to write headlines. I know how photos should go. And then, of course, I'm later the editor of the campus newspaper at Tennessee Knoxville, and it is it's then that I went to go see Batman at the that same late night showing you did, except I was in the Easttown Mall Theater on 640 around Knoxville, which that the whole mall is gone now. So it's
Yeah.
but
We,
but
we
it's
were only
but it
about an
was
hour
there.
and a half away from each other doing that though, so that's
Yeah,
kind of weird.
yeah. So it's all same night. It was nice weather. I remember that.
Yeah.
But no. What I did is after that I went to graduate school and for something else, came back to journalism, became an editor of magazines in Memphis, actually about lumber, and I did that for a year. And I got hired by one of the magazines that I used to read, one of the comics magazines I used to read, called Comics Buyer's Guide. They hired me to run their trade magazine for comic shops, and that put me in the position where 10 years later I would meet the folks at Marvel that would end up hiring me to do Iron Man.
Very cool. So before you got into your field of work, were there any heroes that you had that you wanted to be like, when you grew up or whatever? If you got into it, do you have any writing heroes?
I had. various comics writers, whose work that I followed. I liked Chris Claremont, who did the X-Men. I liked Jim Starlin, who did a Dreadstar. He's also the creator of he's also the creator of Thanos. I liked Steve Englehart, who did Doctor Strange and Captain America, and again later, now he's a friend. That's been one of the coolest things about me going to all the conventions that I'm going to, is that I got to meet these people. And then on the fiction side of things, I was a fan of the work of Arthur C. Clarke, and yeah, a science fiction author who did 2001 and 2010. Those also led directly to some of the courses that I took in college. Which ones I took based on some of the stuff that was in his work. And so basically, it helped that my mother was a grade school librarian in Memphis. My dad, he worked in electronics. My older sister, she was into pop culture, and she took me to see Star Wars. Back in the day when if you couldn't get into the one theater that had it, you weren't going to be able to go because we didn't have multiplexes back then. At least by the time we get to Batman, we're starting to have more than one screen that films are on. Although I will tell you, even in Knoxville in 1989, they had only booked in one theater, they had only booked Batman for one screen, and it was so popular. And the other movie that they had, Ghostbusters 2, which was not very good,
Yeah.
was
Definitely
was
the worst of the Ghostbusters.
yeah, well, it was not doing well. And what they did is they literally, so again, before films were digital, they were on reels, and the film strip would go through the machine. In that theater in Knoxville, they actually had the projection room for one and the projection room for the other room and the other, and they had the film strip for Batman going from one room to the next, attached to two different film projectors at the same time, so they could
Wow.
show both. And it was not good for the film to do that,
I'm sure not.
but that tells you how popular it was, because it was really the first superhero movie that felt like the comics.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal. And a big reason why we were kind of worried about that movie when it came out, that it would look too much like the TV show from back in the 1960s. And comic books had not been like that for a long time.
I started reading comics when I was 4. And the
Mm.
first books my parents ever bought for me, one was Batman and one was Spectacular Spider-Man. And I was
Oh, there you
hooked. And
go.
I still buy books every week. So it's something that's been like a lifelong hobby. But I
Well, I
remember
still have
that.
everything I ever I still have every book pretty much I ever bought. And my mother, again, she was the librarian. She encouraged me to put them in order. And
Yeah. I always have, I'm OCD enough to where I try to do that as much as possible, just to even keep track of what I've got. But like you said, when that movie came out, I'd been a Batman fan for a few years at that point. And it was so good to see it, like when it did come out, and you saw Keaton and Nicholson and these, great actors
yeah.
bringing that to the screen, and just Tim Burton's whole vision of it was just incredible.
Mhm.
Um,
And that's what I try to do with the novel. I try to rhyme with it. I try to
yes,
make it feel like it would have felt. So, for example, our villain in the book, and this isn't a spoiler because we meet him in the first chapter,
yes.
Clayface. Even though he's based on a version of Clayface from the 1930s, 1940s rather, yeah, he is. I write him, instead of being a villain or a monstrous figure, I write him as a tragic figure, because I felt that was what Tim Burton more likely would have done with him.
Absolutely. So along the way through high school, through college at UT, did you have a favorite teacher or a favorite professor along the way who encouraged you to do what you do?
In high school, the my most recent Star Trek novel is called Star Trek: Strange New Worlds: The High Country. It's the first novel that ties into the Strange New World shows, and that was dedicated to three of my teachers that I had in middle school and high school in Memphis. One was my writing coach for the writing Olympics that we had in Memphis, sort of the fiction Olympics kind of thing that we had. One was my English teacher, Mr. Ford, who I sent him a copy of this novel, the Batman novel, when it came out, because there are plays in mentioned in this novel, like The Tempest and Pygmalion, that I read in his class. I still have my copies of the books that I had back then. And so this stuff that I never thought I would use in a million years, I ended up using. And then there was another teacher that I dedicated that novel to. Her name was Ellen Burns. We called her Burnsy, and she was a comic book fan, and she let me turn in some of my reports in comic book form. And again, I'm not suggesting that you do that, but I still have that stuff. I still have everything I ever did, and what it led to was it led to me being able to try to be more creative in a lot of different ways. And more importantly, I treated what I was doing back in high school like I was a real publisher. If you look at my old fanzines and things, I have them laid out with the copyright information and the logo and everything. I made them look just like they would be real, except it was Miller Comics putting them out instead of something else. So yeah, I still have most of those stories. And as I mentioned, I'm borrowing ideas from things that I did years and years ago. That's legal. That's fair. You can steal
Absolutely.
from yourself.
Absolutely. So hopefully there's a lot of my students watching this, maybe current or former. Is there one life lesson that you would pass on to like high school and college students today? One piece of advice you think is good to focus on to find success?
Well, I think in terms of writing, I tell people to write to be read, which is to say, if you're going to write something, make sure somebody reads it. Make sure you're writing it where somebody will read it. Whether you are writing, fan fiction for a forum where other people are actually reading things, or writing articles about the high school football team, or writing reviews, or whatever it is, get used to and get accustomed to people reading your work and giving you feedback on your work, because that's the only way that you're going to get acclimated to doing the work, and also to hitting deadlines and delivering the work when people are wanting to see it. I do caution people not to pay too much attention to what the reviewers say or the critics say if somebody doesn't like what you wrote. I mean, I some of the very first things I did for Marvel had reviews that made me want to hide under my desk for 3 weeks. And you learn after a while to just, first of all, don't go looking for that information after a while, because once you get faith in yourself and your ability to communicate, and you realize, well, all I have to do is make the people who are hiring me to do this work, figure out what they want from this particular work. That was key. I've, over the years, whether it was, I was in graduate school for a while in political science, and I wasn't very good at the topic, but I was good at writing. And I realized, here's how I could write the way that they want me to write, And that carried me through. And if I wanted to stay in it, I could have, but I decided I would do something more fun. So yeah, I guess what I would say is you're write whenever you can, write where somebody can actually read it, write where what you do is going to be permanent. If it's not in a book, if it ends up on a website or something like that, or in a blog, make sure you save copies of it. My computer, I've got a version of every file system that I've had for 30 years on my computer, so that it's nothing. Yeah, I'm still working on ideas that I was writing on in college, or writing about, because I've still got the original files. And again, try to make sure that you write for somebody other than just yourself, so you can get accustomed to the feedback, and then you have to learn how seriously to take the feedback at a certain point, because nobody can write your story like you.
Very good advice. So, last question I got for you. In Tennessee tonight, my computer tells me right now it's 15 degrees, and you mentioned you're in rural Wisconsin. How's it feel up there tonight?
It is 17 below zero. I'm amused because I went to grad school at Louisiana State, and
Mhm.
of course it's snowing in
Yeah.
New Orleans right now. So I sympathize with everybody,
The
but
point is, it's a good night to curl up with a good book like
that's
Batman
right.
Resurrection.
Yeah, I've been up here for 30 years now, and it's not as I'm more used to it than I have been, but you never really get used to it.
I understand. Well, sir, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm sure my students are going to appreciate it. And you mentioned there would be a sequel to Batman Resurrection, so I greatly look
Yeah,
forward to that.
it's called Batman Revolution, and it comes out this fall. And my name is John Jackson Miller. I've got pages on Facebook, Instagram. I got a website, farawaypress.com, where I've got notes about all the books that I've done.
Awesome. Everybody watching, make sure to check him out. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, and thanks for staying after school with Mr. Van Huss.